freight train rolling, bringing truth bombs down the line. Promoting the Southland 1 week at a time. Promoting the Southland 1 week at a time. SCV chat starts now.
It's happened again.
Sorry. It's 7 o'clock. I got off a little bit early from work today for Independence Day and took a nap in my rocking chair. Views, opinions expressed, not necessarily ours, or they are ours, but not the SCV. It's GEC, any division, brigade, camp, or other subsidiaries. Strictly those of us who are expressing them. They are ours, not theirs. Whew, shoot, buddy. Moose is back from being on the loose.
Yep, I just got back from vacation. Got back in late yesterday.
Moose was in Florida.
At the beach. It was beautiful.
Did you sorry, I have a Facebook thing on. And I'm getting notifications. I thought I'd turn those off. Susie, while I love you, please stop messaging during the show. I know you're not watching.
That made the day.
Figure out how to turn that off. Hey, Moose, did you know that moose can swim at 6 miles per hour and keep that pace for up to 2 hours?
This moose can't. This moose swam a lot at the beach, and he did not keep that pace.
Did you keep it for 5 minutes?
About 5 minutes. I'm not as.
Did you get up to 6 miles per hour?
I wouldn't say I got up to 6 miles per hour, but I did paddle there for a while.
Well, that's fun. Moose came back sick from Florida.
That he did.
We're currently blaming a certain Florida member for Moose's sickness. Hope everybody's having a great time. Hope everybody who's coming back from Gettysburg is safe and everything like that. For those of us down south, we've been in a little bit of a heat wave. So, remember to drink water, change your socks, stay hydrated, stay cool. We don't want anybody to be, getting messed up with, heat strokes or anything like that. Moose, what's new on the website?
Well, if you go to the sign-up page and type in your email, you enter a giveaway.
Oh, we announced that?
Yeah, we announced it. You're the one that announced it.
Slept since then. Yeah, we have a giveaway going on. What are we giving away?
We haven't told them yet.
The suspense is killing them. And I've got very bad internet connection tonight.
Yeah, so do I. The storms in southern Mississippi have been brutal, apparently.
Yeah, let me see if I can connect to my personal hotspot that's on my cell phone really quickly. Seeing everybody's in. Jack, I hope y'all have a great time this weekend with your camps and
He froze. I do hope. Are you back? He is not. We do hope you have a great 28th anniversary there, Jack. The Gainesville Volunteers Camp SCV 373. I wish I could make it. Sadly, I don't think I'm going to be able to. I will be stuck in upper Mississippi. I have a promise to keep and a friend to go see. I like to stick to my word, so I'm going to go see him. I haven't seen him in a while, and we have a pretty cool celebration. The movie was great. For those who do not know, I am a stupidly crazy big Indiana Jones fan. And
kind of inspired his life a little bit.
it inspired my life way too much. Probably.
So just trying to kill time. We like to get 20 people live. Hey, if you're watching and while we're killing time, remember to share this episode. Share, like. Moose is coughing behind the scenes. So we can get some people up, because this tonight is our continuation of the heroes of our heroes. Tonight we're talking about the pen of the American Revolution. We've talked about the voice, Patrick Henry. We've talked about the sword, George Washington. Tonight we're talking about the pen, the man who wrote down what the American Revolution was all about in the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson. So while we're waiting on folks to come on in, there's a story that I read years ago. It was a very interesting story that took place in the 1810s. Before I continue on with this, we're only covering up to 1776 in tonight's episode. Next week, we are going to follow up with 1776 all the way to the end of his life. But anyway, it's in the 1810s. And there's this clergyman who stops at Ford's Tavern in Virginia. Ford's Tavern was on the road between Monticello and Poplar Forest. And he encounters a man, a stranger he's never met before, and he engages him in a conversation at some length. They first talk about different things like mechanical operations, and he's certain that the man's a farmer or an engineer of some type. They then move on to matters of agriculture and literature and things of that nature. And he begins to wonder what this man's vocation is. And finally, they talk about religion. And the Reverend is certain that he just got done talking to a clergyman like himself. The hour goes late, and people go to bed. And the next morning, he wakes up to go get breakfast at the tavern, and he's talking to the tavern keeper, asking him about the stranger from the night before. The tavern keeper asks him to describe him, and he says he's a clergyman like me, kind of fair-complected with red hair. And the barkeep says, well, don't you know, that's no minister, that's Thomas Jefferson. Just an interesting story about the complexity of Jefferson. Jefferson was a truly Renaissance man in his time. An inventor as well as a statesman, orator, writer, and things of that nature, scientist, architect, everything like that. A Southerner born in Virginia, obviously, and we'll start with our biography there, unless you have anything to say, Moose.
No, you go ahead.
So Jefferson was born in Albemarle. Excuse me, that's my brother-in-law calling me. He should know better than that. Albemarle County, Virginia, on the edge of the Virginia wilderness on April 13th, 1743. He recounted that his earliest memory was being carried on a pillow by one of his father's servants. His mother was Jane Randolph, who was of the aristocratic planter class, and from one of the most prominent families of Virginia. I believe the Randolphs were also married into the Lees at some point. But his father, Peter Jefferson, was a self-made man. He was an industrious man. He was a surveyor, worked his way up to being a planter, came from a Welsh background, I believe, and was fiercely independent. As a child, he told his son stories of the frontier. He introduced him to the Native Americans in the area, and took him in deep woods, showing him, what was all around him. And it instilled a love of the natural world into Jefferson. But more importantly, Jefferson enjoyed the freedom and liberty that he found inside the woods. By the time that he was 6, Jefferson was showing a great aptitude. He was pouring through books in his father's library. His father taught him, how to read and things like that. He soon had mastered Greek and Latin and had taught himself the violin, a real savant. But in August of 1757, when he was 14 years old, his father suddenly passed away. Jefferson, when he recollected at the age of 14, he pretty much said that his care was thrown in the direction of myself, and was thrown on myself entirely, without a relative or friend qualified to advise or guide me and recollect the various sorts of bad company with which I associated with from time to time. I'm astonished that I did not turn off with some of them and become as worthless to society as they were. In Jefferson's will, Jefferson Sr., Peter Jefferson's will, he dictated that Thomas Jefferson, should be educated properly. And he was sent away to a one-room schoolhouse, and he required the classical education that was essential for that day. Reading, writing, arithmetic, stuff like that. Again, Jefferson had already taught himself Greek and Latin, though. So he was well above what the schoolhouse rudimentary education that he could offer. But more importantly, he met a young man there by the name of Dabney Carr, and they became best friends. On the weekends, the two rode their horses to the top of what they would call Tom's Mountain on his father's land, and that mountain overlooked the village of Charlottesville. They would study together in the shade of trees that they found, especially one great oak that they both loved. And Jefferson began to talk about building a home there, and the two boys promised each other, in much like young friends do. Young friends make promises to each other. Harrison and I, we're young friends. We've made promises to each other. Quote, he died in the war, unquote. Right? Right.
He died in the war.
Yeah. That's something between us. Anyway, they promised to each other, should one die before the other and the other one still live, they would bury their friend on the mountain. 1 year later, at the age of 16, my math wasn't right, Jefferson, attended by one of his servants named Jupiter, went to the College of William and Mary at Williamsburg, colonial capital of Virginia at that time. And just like my first semester at college and Moose's first semester at college, he really didn't study that much. Jefferson said about it, quote, from the circumstances of my position, I was often thrown into the society of horse racers, card players, fox hunters, scientific and professional men, and of dignified men. And many a time I asked myself, which of these kinds of reputation should I prefer, that of a horse jockey, a fox hunter, an orator, or the honest advocate of my country's rights? He attended horse races. He attended balls. He danced and had a lot of fun time with girls. But when he went home that summer, he realized just how much time he had wasted. So he gathered up his friend Dabney Carr, and they both went back to William and Mary at that time. If you remember from our Patrick Henry episode, about this time is when Patrick Henry and Thomas Jefferson actually meet. Jefferson being a young student in between, his home and the colony of William and Mary, would stop and have to stay at the tavern that was ran by Patrick Henry, and they became close friends at that time. Anyway, Jefferson begins this next school year with a huge devotion to his books. He said that I was a hard student until I entered the business of life, he remembered. He said that he studied for 15 hours out of every 24 hours. Moose, do you do that?
Negative.
Jefferson, being a shy person, but still charmful, his shy and unusual seriousness prompted one of his professors to introduce him to George Wythe, the colony's leading attorney, who agreed to take Jefferson on and to teach him the law. If you remember again when we talked about Patrick Henry last episode, not last episode, but last Heroes of a Hero episode. During that time, you read law under an attorney, and then you went before a board of magistrates and got your law license that way. Jefferson said of Wythe that he was my second father. He was my faithful and beloved mentor, and Wythe, for his part, proudly showed off his prize student to the men who ruled Virginia. It was his brilliance and open mindedness that young Jefferson inspired the governor of Virginia to invite him to the palace for 1 week for dinner, conversation, and music. And at that table, Jefferson was exposed to the occurrence of France that was called the Enlightenment, the ideology of John Locke and things of that nature. And that really influenced Jefferson later on. And it was said that that dining room was really Jefferson's university. As a student, Jefferson was soaking in all the learning he could get. The Enlightenment for Jefferson was a spirit of intellectual optimism. The Enlightenment thinkers saw the good in the human spirit, and Jefferson was most intoxicated by the idea that human beings possess the potential to do remarkable good, and that a government could be created which would tap into the spirit, tap into the impulse to do good. Jefferson eventually earned his living at the law, became a lawyer. But politics began to take more and more of his time. He traveled throughout the colony. He had a chess set in one saddlebag and a violin in his others, as some people recall. And he saw that the world was very like the world that the English Enlightenment philosophers had envisioned. Locke, Bacon, and Newton all preached of freedom of the mind, but in the British colonies, each citizen was expected to obey without complaint the dictates of a far-off parliament. At the age of 27, Jefferson moved to the hill which he and Dabney Carr had named Tom's Mountain when they were boys. He renamed it Monticello, Italian for Little Mountain, and began to build a house for himself. And again, talking about architecture, an architect, Jefferson dabbled at it or tried to dabble at it. Jefferson wrote, "I have lately removed to the mountain. I have here a one room which serves for me parlor and kitchen and all. I may add for bedchamber and study too. I have hopes, however, of getting more elbow room this summer." So it's essentially, graduating college and going out on his own and renting a studio apartment. But instead of him renting the studio apartment, he built the studio apartment. Where you think about the one-room cabins. And when I first read this, from Jefferson, the Jacob Townsend and Son sutler, Revolutionary War sutler, did an experimental archaeology thing a couple of years ago. And they built a one-room cabin, like it would be on the frontier, and that's what I have in mind. With Jefferson's. At some point, Jefferson's sister Martha actually married his close friend and colleague Dabney Carr, which was a great pleasing to Jefferson. However, in October of 1765, Jefferson, his sister Jane, passed away at the age of 25. I forgot to mention that Jefferson was one of 10 siblings. Jefferson was so upset about Jane's passing that he actually wrote a farewell epitaph for her in Latin. Jefferson began soon after he began assembling his first library. Books after books. The first library grew to over 200 volumes in his youth. Many of these books included books that were inherited from his father or left to him by George Wythe. Sadly, most of those were destroyed in 1770 when there was a fire. He continued on growing his library throughout the rest of his life. So yeah, that's a little bit of interest there. You got anything you want to add so far, Moose?
On the library, because it's something I always found interesting about Jefferson. He was able to make 3 massive libraries in his time. His first library had over 200 volumes of books. His second library, after he lost the first one in a fire, grew to 1,250 books. And then I think it was, by the time he sold it, it was 6,500 volumes. and he sold that to the Library of Congress, or to Congress for the Library of Congress after Britain burned it down, the original one. He then started to remake one years later, telling one of his close friends, John Adams, that he just could not live without having a library. And I'm pretty sure his third library ended up being donated to the University of Virginia shortly after his death, if I'm not mistaken.
I had to go get water.
Yeah.
So anyway, that takes us to early 1771. Jefferson began to court a young widow named Martha Wells Skelton. Her first husband, her late husband, was a fellow lawyer. Sadly, there's no image of her that has ever been found, but she was said to be beautiful, graceful, and fond of music. Again, you got to remember that Jefferson, he played the violin. He taught himself how to play the violin. He actually called her Patty. I don't know where you get Patty out of Martha Wells Skelton, but Patty. They were married at her father's house on New Year's Day, 1772. She was 23, he was 28, so there's still hope for me yet. 2 weeks later, the newlyweds rode off through the snow to start their new life together at Monticello. By this point, he had bricked up the cottage, but he was still drawing up far more ambitious plans. They were actually based on the Italian Renaissance master. I'm not going to try to pronounce that, Poliato. I actually did try to pronounce that. But, you know, you have to remember the Renaissance was inspired by ancient Greece and Rome. The cottage was cold and dark, and Martha was said to have shivered at the horrible dreariness of such a small house. But Jefferson was rummaged around and found a half bottle of wine behind some books on a shelf, and they started their married life together in the tiny 18-foot by 18-foot cottage clinging to the edge of his mountain. I believe it was actually French wine, which would have been illegal at the time. So Patsy and Jefferson began their lives together. They had several children. The first child, Martha, whom they called Patsy, was born at Monticello the following fall, so the fall of 1772. In May of 1773, though, tragedy strikes when Jefferson's friend and brother-in-law Dabney Carr died of bilious fever. And true to his word, Jefferson saw to it that he was laid to rest at Monticello. He would, through all of his life, he sought to escape the sadness in numbers. He was really good at numbers, and he spent the time calculating how long it would take his servants to dig the grave for his friend, Dabney. Let's backtrack for a little bit, back to Jefferson and his law career. Jefferson was admitted to the bar in 1767, well before he married Patsy. And he was selected as a delegate in the Virginia House of Burgesses. He served from 1769 to 1775. While a delegate to the House of Burgesses, he pursued reforms on slavery, including writing and sponsoring legislation in 1769 to strip power away from the royal governors and courts, instead providing masters of slaves the discretion to emancipate them if they wanted to. Jefferson persuaded his cousin Richard Bland to spearhead the legislation's passage, but it faced strong opposition in a state whose whole economy was largely agrarian. Jefferson also took 7 cases of freedom-seeking slaves. He waived his fee for one he claimed should be freed before the minimum statutory age of emancipation. Jefferson invoked natural law, arguing every man comes to the world with a right to his own person and using it as his own will. This is what is called personal liberty and is given him by the author of nature because it is necessary for his own sustenance. The judge cut him off and ruled against his client, but after consolation, Jefferson gave his client some money, which was conceivably used to aid his escape shortly after. However, Jefferson's underlying intellectual argument that all men were entitled by their creator, what he labeled as a natural right to liberty, is one that we would hear about when he was authoring the Declaration of Independence. Jefferson also took on 68 cases for the General Court of Virginia in 1767. In addition to 3 notable cases, Howell v. Netherland, Bowling v. Bowling, and Blair v. Blair. The British Parliament responded by passing the Intolerable Acts in 1774, and Jefferson wrote a resolution calling for a day of fasting and prayer in protest and a boycott of all British goods. Jefferson's resolutions were later expanded into a summary view of the rights of British America, for which he argued that people have the right to govern themselves, which again at this time was treasonous to the colony or to the king. In fact, had they wanted to, they could have arrested him and drawn and quartered him. So. In this work, Jefferson held that the allodial title, not feudal title, was held to American lands, and thus people did not owe fees or rents for lands paid to the British Crown. It's pretty much the prelude to the Declaration of Independence. Let's skip forward around to Jefferson at the age of 33, where in 1775 and the Second Continental Congress. Again, we mentioned that before being sent to the Continental Congress. And who did he replace in the Continental Congress there, Moose?
I believe he replaced our good old friend George Washington.
The sword of the American Revolution. Wow. Anyway.
That's George Washington.
That's George Washington. It all knits in together, folks. These Virginians are all intertwined. Anyway, at the age of 33, he was one of the youngest delegates to the Second Continental Congress, beginning in 1775, there at the real outbreak of the American Revolution, where a formal declaration of independence from Britain was overwhelmingly favored. Again, you have to remember that by this point, the Tea Parties happened, Bunker Hills happened, Lexington conquered, all that jazz. Anyway, talks of full independence, not just an olive branch, is going on. Jefferson, like we mentioned earlier, was inspired by the idealist of the Enlightenment, Locke, Montesquieu, all them. Jefferson sought out John Adams, a Continental Congress delegate from Massachusetts, an emerging leader in Congress. They became close friends, and Adams supported Jefferson's appointment to the Committee of Five. The Committee of Five was a group of 5 members who drafted and presented to Congress what would become the Declaration of Independence. You have to, and the key portion of that declaration is the resolution from Virginia that the colonies should be free and independent states, and all allegiance to the British Crown should be abolished. And who presented that, Moose? Moose can't speak. It was Richard Henry Lee. When did we talk about Richard Henry Lee? In the Lees of Old Virginia episode.
Go check that out.
It all comes together like we kind of planned this. Who'd have thunk it? Anyway, the members of the Committee of Five were Adams, Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, of Pennsylvania, Robert Livingston of New York, and Roger Sherman of Connecticut. The committee initially thought that Adams should write the document, but Adams pretty much told Jefferson that you're a better writer than him due to the Declaration of the Rights of Man. No, that's not it. The Summary View of the Rights of British America. Excuse me, I'm sorry. That's later on. That's in the French Revolution. Anyway, he said that Jefferson was a better writer, and the fact that Adams was obnoxious and disliked, and that Congress would not pass that, and it needed to come from Virginia because Virginia because Virginia proposed the resolution. Virginia was the largest and most prosperous colony, so it really should fall onto them. So the Declaration of Independence was first introduced. Well, let's backtrack for a second. Jefferson and his committee members had 17 days really to write the Declaration of Independence. And Jefferson spent most of those 17 days in isolation between June 11th and 28th in 1776 in the second floor of a 3-story Georgian-style home that he was renting at 700 Market Street in Center City, Philadelphia. The residence was owned by a bricklayer of German descent. In authoring the Declaration, Jefferson drew considerably on his proposed draft of the Virginia Constitution, George Mason's first draft of Virginia's Declaration and Bill of Rights, and other sources. Other committee members made some changes, but the final draft was presented to Congress on June 28, 1776, which would have been last Wednesday's anniversary. The Declaration was, and that was on a Friday though, the Declaration was introduced and Congress began debate on its contents on Monday, July 1st, resulting in removal of roughly a fourth of Jefferson's original draft, including passage that was a passage authored that was critical of King George III and, quote, Jefferson's anti-slavery clause, quote, which criticized George III for importing slavery to the colonies. Jefferson resented the changes, but he did not speak publicly to the revisions. On July 4th, 1776, the Congress ratified the Declaration, and delegates signed it, delegates began signing it on August 2nd. In doing so, the delegates were knowingly committing high treason against the Crown, which was deemed the most serious criminal offense and was punishable by torture and death, including hanging from the point of death, disembowelment, emasculation, decapitation, dismemberment, disembowelment and burning, and everything like that. We're going to pause right there because we've been at it for 44 minutes, and we just want to talk a little bit. At least I want to talk a little bit about a little bit about Jefferson, not so much biography-wise, but just some little tidbits that I picked up while doing this episode. Jefferson, while in the Continental Congress, was kind of seated near a window, which had the barometer and thermometer right beside it. And weirdly enough, the only thing that he wrote in his diary for July 4th, 1776, was that he recorded the temperature, and that was it. He didn't record how the debate went. He didn't record anything like that. He just recorded the temperature of the day. Jefferson, I'm sure, knew the importance of what was going on and what was being said, just as well as he knew the importance of what he had written. But he just chose to write down the temperature and stuff, which kind of, in my opinion, goes to the modesty of Jefferson. If you look at Jefferson's tombstone, the only thing that really you see, I'm trying to pull it up really quickly.
I can answer a question while you do that.
Or go ahead.
All right. So the SCV chat official historian Michael C. Hardy has a question. What did Jefferson read? Luckily, I did take a couple notes on this in my own personal notes for tonight. He read a lot. He just had a thirst for knowledge. So there's not just things we can point. There's a lot we could point to, but I mean it's just a crazy amount. At one point, this man had over 6,000 books in his library. But from what I saw, he read books about science, math, architects, rare. I believe I already said science, but I'm going to cover that because I made a point to put it in caps because he did read a lot of books about science discovery, scientific thinking, and stuff like that. He also read books in their original languages. He read books in French, Italian, Spanish, Greek, Latin, and a couple others, I do believe. But he did have a love of classical reading older books. And he has this to say about novels. He did not like novels. Jefferson said that he thought novels were trash. He felt like your time should be focused on reading books about knowledge and gaining knowledge instead of, I guess, I think he said in this letter, going off into fantasy land. Even as he got older, he stopped reading the newspaper because he'd rather spend times reading one of his books instead of reading about the news. But that's what I have on that one.
Good job, Moose. I'm so proud of you. Anyway, when Jefferson was rather modest for everything that he was able to accomplish in his life. Again, looking at his tombstone, it's simply inscribed, "Here was buried Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of American Independence, of the Statute of Virginia for Religious Freedom, and father of the University of Virginia." Um, which, of course, some of that is going to be covered in the next episode. But I mean, he doesn't, like I said, later on after the American Revolution is won and after it inspires France's Revolution, he doesn't record how he was feeling. He doesn't record how anybody else is feeling, or anything like that that you would put in a diary, especially when you're committing, I don't know, high treason against the crown. So I found that interesting. One thing that everybody knows is that he was very soft spoken. Um, he was rather shy. Didn't say all that much in Congress, but was a heck of a writer. He let his writing do his talking for him. Most science books he wrote were not classics at the time. That's right, Michael Hardy. They're classics today, but I think when Moose was saying classics, he's talking about the stuff from antiquity, real antiquity, stuff from the
Yes.
Renaissance era, and the Greek and Greek, Latin, stuff.
He enjoyed those books a lot. He had about 400 of those types of books, I believe, maybe more.
One thing that we haven't really talked about, and really, like I said, we wanted to get to 1776 and stop because we figured that was a good stopping point for everything, but didn't realize we get there that quickly. Normally, I droll on and on and on, and we get to a point where, oh crap, we're an hour and 30 minutes into it, and this guy still has 40 years left before he croaks. Happened last week. But so, some things that people do not realize is that Jefferson was an inventor. He invented a desk that essentially was like a copy machine. So you put your quill in hand, and the other quill sits on the sheet of paper, and as you write, it copies your movements. Really big fan of macaroni and cheese. He invented a revolving book stand, which is still on, and that's one thing that I also found interesting in his retirement is that he would be able to read 4, 5, 6 books at the same time. The book stand had multiple layers on it, and he was able to view multiple books and, okay, move to this one, move to this one, move to this one. It was 5 book stands, and he could swivel it to read a new page. And it also had the strange ability to be folded down into a cube, so it was easy for transport. The dumbwaiter. He had 5 dumbwaiters in his dining area. Something about a clock, a wheel cipher. The polygraph is, the copying thing. A macaroni machine. Perfected a pedometer. And Moose, I don't know if you're sitting in one or not, but he created a swivel chair, the first model of the swivel chair. Did you know that, Moose? He also invented a certain plow, and things like that. So he was a farmer. Swivel chair. It was one chair sat on another with pretty much a hole cut out in it, and it had a window shaft, a window curtain, for lack of a better term, casters in there. There's a funny scene out of Downton Abbey, which Moose you really need to watch, where it was the Dowager Countess comes and visits Matthew, one of the first 3 episodes, and she sits down in the swivel chair, and it's rocking back and forth with her. And she said, "Good God, what type of contraption is this?" And Matthew says, "Oh, it's a swivel chair." And she says, "Is it a new invention?" And he says, "It was invented by Thomas Jefferson." And she goes, "Ah, yes, leave it to an American to mess something up." So, ha 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 ha. So we're going to take a break here from Thomas Jefferson and pick up on it next week. For the rest of the episode, we're going to talk about National Reunion, where you can find Moose and myself during reunion. Sorry, this necklace is bothering me. When we're out and about, and kind of what our game plans are. Not all of our game plans, because we have some sites we'd like to see privately ourselves. Yeah, so Moose, Wednesday, what's our game plan?
To not die.
That's our daily game plan there, Moose. So Wednesday is the pre-GEC meeting. Moose should be there. If he's not, I know I'll be there for sure. We're going to sit there and listen. Our first live stream will be Wednesday evening. We're going to shoot for 8 o'clock local time, which I still think is Central Standard Time in Hot Springs. Google that really quickly, Moose. Excuse me. But at local time, 8 o'clock, we'll go live, giving an update on everything like that. If the commander-in-chief will give us his permission on Thursday, we will broadcast the opening ceremonies. Do that like we did last year. Hopefully I will be awake in time to actually make it down there.
It's Central Time.
Good. Once we finish the opening ceremonies, there's usually a time for us to take a break. And when we take that break, we pop out. We will try to go live throughout the day as best as possible whenever we have breaks in the business session. But for sure, on Thursday evening, again at about 8 o'clock local time, we will be doing our first breakdown of the reunion. We'll try to do this in a centralized location. So if you want to come by and say hello, we'll be there. If or we could play a hide and seek.
Hide and seek.
Okay, we'll play hide and seek.
We almost forgot an important detail though.
What? Moose hunt?
No. Moose Mania 3.
Oh God.
If you want to participate in Moose Mania this year, just like last year, find me after the business sessions are over. And we usually will text it out on our Facebook. But what it is, you come take a picture with me and General McMoose.
Harrison's got a stuffed moose that Mrs. The past First Lady, Linda Grambling gave him a couple years ago that he brings in as a photo op. David Perkins, will there be any notification? David, we try to stick to that 8 o'clock schedule as best as possible, but sometimes stuff happens. Forrest and I will sit down the past couple of years and start working on something on the Mississippi end, and all of a sudden we look up and it's 9 o'clock and we've missed our deadline, and Moose is nowhere to be found. He's off losing keys and things.
No, we're not talking about that.
So that's but we try to pre-schedule as best as we can. StreamYard gives us a very narrow hour or so window that we maybe it's half an hour that we have to go live if we put that in there. So if we let's say for example we go to dinner and we don't get seated until 7 o'clock. And our food doesn't arrive till 8, we're not going to be able to go live at 8 o'clock. So we will miss our window of opportunity. That's why we're shooting so late in the evening to get our broadcasts out. But we will be broadcasting. Friday, because we go straight into business on Friday, we won't be able to broadcast anything. But we will go We will go do a rundown at about 8 o'clock. Would like to try to broadcast the National Memorial Service this year. We tried that last year, but something got in the way. I can't remember. And then same thing on Saturday. Now, last year, Moose on Saturday did the kind of a red carpet thing with the awards, or not awards banquet, grand banquet and ball and debutante presentation. I think we need to get permission to broadcast that again. So we may do that, may not do that. Depends on permission. But we will try to keep y'all updated on everything that is happening throughout the day.
And there will be a lot of stuff that will just appear on the page. We keep saying we're going to do it, but normally we try to go out and interview a couple of GEC members.
We did that in Kenner.
Yeah, we did that. And then we usually try to bug Jason.
And this year is a very interesting year for us. I've got to get my video camera working. The reason why it's an interesting year is all living past commanders and chiefs that are still active in the organization will be here, be at reunion. So it would be nice for us to go live and do a couple of interviews with them, things of that nature. So definitely worth tuning in for. But guys, we've been at it for an hour. We've still got about 40 years of Jefferson's life that we need to cover. So remember, tune in next Monday for SCV Chat, where we will be talking about Thomas Jefferson again, finishing up. Do you want to fight these false narratives? Do you want to learn the truth and spread the truth about our beloved Southland? Then go and sign up for our website. Sign up for the SCV, first of all, scv.org. But also sign up for our website, scvchat.org, or .com, excuse me, where you get updates on what's going on with the show, things about the giveaway, things about the Patreon we announced the other day, just good things like that. Look forward to seeing y'all at National Reunion. This upcoming Thursday, we have Commander's Comments. We have a special guest on this Commander's Comments, right?
Yes, we will have Lieutenant Commander in Chief Walter D. Donnie Kennedy on to host Commander's Comments this week. And of course, we have our Commander in Chief Jason Bashir's on as well.
Guys, if you have not read your veteran, please go read your veteran. If you can't find your most recent copy of your veteran, they are available online. We do have constitutional amendments this year. Go read those. If your camp, we've only got a couple weeks left, get your camp to discuss them, and especially if you're a delegate, because our Constitution governs all of us. So, definitely, and they will impact the future of the SCV. So definitely go do that. Grab yourself a corn dog. We didn't take a Pop-Tart break, but Pop-Tart's not sponsoring us right now. So we're going to end it with a word from our sponsor for this season, the Kennedy twins. One of them will be on this upcoming Thursday, as Moose said, for Commander's Comments, and their new book, Jefferson Davis and the High Road to the Emancipation. It's a very interesting book. I'm about a little over halfway done with it. You can get that book on their website, kennedytwins.com, or you can go to scv.org, buy it from the store, or visit beauvoir.org, buy it from their store. I'm sure they'll have some at National Reunion as well. If you buy it online, I'm sure they'll be happy to autograph it for free. You wanna bring us out?
Yeah.
You want to know a few more?
Yeah, I can handle that. And remember, everybody, to know Fumar in the elevator. We will see. Yeah, Ref Rock. We'll see you Thursday, 7 p.m. Confederate Standard Time.